everyone. My research, which is our research, how young Greek Cypriots define their ethnic identity, a thematic analysis that we did, is actually part of a bigger project. And for that, would like to thank the FCT, the research center of our university. Okay, so first I think it's good to explain what is ethnic identity. So according to the social identity theory, I'm not going to bore you with theories, people tend to group themselves, and they do that in order to have a positive self-concept, in order to think of themselves positively, because that becomes part of their identity. And they will do things to achieve, maintain, and protect their positive self-identity. And when I say things, I mean their behavior, their attitude, how they feel about their identity will change, will depend in order to keep this positive self-concept. Getting more specifically about ethnic identity, which is part of the social identity, there is not a... So going back, about ethnic identity, there is not a consensus term, meaning that there is not one term which can define accurately and specifically ethnic identity, because it depends on how people define it and the timeline that we're talking about ethnic identity. However, there are two common elements about how people usually define their ethnic identity. And one of them defines them as who the common ancestor of that group is. And the other part is the geographical line that defines the group. Ethnic identities form in early adolescence. And according to the intergroup emotions theory, people tend to feel the same about their ethnic identity, or they may have feelings towards one thing because of their ethnic identity. So and what do I mean specifically about that? So I may feel something as a person, but I may feel differently about the same thing as a group. So when I identify, I can feel differently. So going more specifically about the young Greek Cypriots, they live in Cyprus and they identify as Greek Cypriots. And what defines them, what used to define them, was the language and religion. And we can see different studies here where students embrace different multiple identities between Greek Cypriots and Cypriots. So some people, they will define themselves as Greek Cypriots and others as Cypriots, and their identity will change based on the communication context. And this suggests that based on the educational system, common religion, and political ideologies, people use these things to define their ethnic identity. Another study shows that the conditions that Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots will cohabitate together, because now they live separately, are different, showing that ethnic and social identity can shape attitudes towards different groups, especially in a conflict setting. So for this study, what we wanted to see is what are the factors that young people in Cyprus, more specifically those who identify as Greek Cypriots, define their ethnic identity and how they feel about it. So for this study, we used reflexive thematic analysis by Browns and Clark as a method. We used 10 participants, all of them born and raised in Cyprus. They identified as Greek Cypriots. They were between the ages of 18 to 30 years old. We took samples from people who live and were born in the south part of Nicosia, Larnaca, Limassol, Paphos. Everyone, their native language is Greek, except one participant who said that her native language is Greek and English. So for the sampling, we used convenience sampling at first, and then we moved on with snowballing sampling, meaning that one participant would suggest another participant who believe that they will be interested in the study. The interviewer identified with the same ethnic group so that participants will feel comfortable and trust the participant, considering the sensitive nature of the interview. All of the interviews were in person. They were approximately 40 minutes. They assessed knowledge, feelings, and experience about their ethnic identity. And the interview was semi-structured and had open-ended questions, meaning that we had some questions that they were set, and based on the discussion of the interview, we may have added certain questions. All of the interviews were audio recorded, transcribed, and translated to English. So the results, from the results, we extracted 4 themes. The first one is that all of the participants directly or indirectly expressed the need for a unique identity. And more specifically, they focused on language, history, and tradition. So a lot of participants stressed the fact that being a Greek Cypriot is a unique identity because the language is different, the history is different, and traditions are different. What was also interesting here was that participants compared themselves to Greeks and Turkish Cypriots. The other theme that stood out was the conflicting feelings of this identity. So a lot of participants focused on the discomfort, frustration, and disappointment, mainly due to the sociopolitical constraints. And more specifically, those sociopolitical constraints limit their ability to express criticisms and explore alternative viewpoints about their country and other Cypriots. So having that, and at the same time, they will focus on the comfort and sense of security they are able to enjoy. So here they have negative feelings, and at the same time, they express positive feelings. The other theme was political apathy, meaning that participants wouldn't express any interest in politics. And here they focused more on the lack of trust towards the politicians and understanding how politics work. And this creates a feeling of frustration for them. So that will disinterest them and becomes part of their identity because it's something that one can describe about them. And the other thing, the last thing, is that as an identity, Greek Cypriots is difficult, it's challenging to change the societal norm. And here participants focused and explained this theme by explaining that there is stagnation in societal programs and becomes as an obstacle to their ethnic identity, which at the end identifies them. Moving on to the discussion, there are a couple of things that stood out. The first one is language. So language is one of those mediums where I becomes as a way to identify, delineate one identity. So it's not normal, but that didn't took our attention. However, what was interesting here is that language became a part where, for them, it became a bias. And here in psychology, we have the linguistic in-group bias. So people would be biased in terms of language. So if someone doesn't speak or have the same accent as that group, they can become biased. The other thing that it's important to talk about, especially in something that we see in post-conflict societies, is historical victimhood. So what that means is that people take the narrative, the historical narrative of their group, of their ethnic group, and they use it to portray themselves as victims. And usually what they do here is that they externalize the problem. So it's the fault of someone else, and that actually becomes part of their identity. The other topic, which is important and very relative to the study, is the rigid dichotomous boundaries that were shown here, especially when people were used other groups to identify their group, meaning that, especially in the first theme where there was this need to express a unique identity, they used Greeks or Turkish Cypriots in order to define their identity. And actually, this is also part where it can be an in-group bias. So being biased about my group, being better or worse, based on how rigid and dichotomous the boundaries are. So what is next? So this study actually, as I said at the beginning, is part of a bigger project, and these results will be used for conflict resolution and reconciliation program. However, at the same time, they can be used as treatment plans by psychologists, because when you know how one person identifies with their ethnic identity, you can see the cultural normalcy. And at the same time, you can be culturally sensitive, meaning that you can understand how the other person perceives some things and how this filter can change based on their ethnic identity. And that's it. I don't know if you have any questions.